All right. Chapter 3. Southern plantations and the holy heads of Negroes pounding the ground, cries in the northern regions, and round white faces turned to the sky, fiery globes in the sky, a study in black, white, and golden formations in one general glow. Upon the night of November 13th and 14th, 1833, occurred the most sensational celestial spectacle of the 19th century. For 6 hours, fiery meteors gushed from the heavens and were visible along the whole Atlantic coast of the United States. One supposes that astronomers do not pound the ground with their heads, and presumably they do not screech, but they have feelings just the same. They itched. Here was nothing to formulate. When he hears of something new and unquestionable in the sky, an astronomer is diseased with ill-suppressed equations. Symbols persecute him for expression. His is the frenzy of someone who would stop automobiles, railroad trains, bicycles, all things, to measure them, run with a yardstick after sparrows, flies, all persons passing his door. This is supposed to be scientific, but it can be monomaniac. Very likely the distress and the necessity of Professor Olmsted were keenest. He was the first to formulate. He demonstrated that these meteors, known as the Leonids, revolved around the sun once in 6 months. They didn't. Then Professor Newton demonstrated that the real period was 33¼ years. But this was done empirically, and that is not divine nor even aristocratic, and the thing would have to be done rationally or mathematically by someone, because if there be not mathematical treatment in gravitational terms of such phenomena, astronomers are in reduced circumstances. It was Dr. Adams who, emboldened with his experience in not having to point anywhere near Neptune, but nevertheless being acclaimed by all patriotic Englishmen as the real discoverer of Neptune, mathematically confirmed Professor Newton's findings. Dr. Adams predicted that the Leonids would return in November 1866 and in November 1899, occupying several years upon each occasion and passing to a point in this Earth's orbit. There were meteors upon the night of November 13th and 14th, 1866. They were plentiful. They often are in the middle of November. They no more resembled the spectacle of 1833 than an ordinary shower resembles a cloudburst. But the demonstration required that there should be an equal display, or, according to some aspects, a greater display, upon the corresponding night of the next year. There was a display the next year, but it was in the sky of the United States and was not seen in England. Another occurrence, nothing like that of 1833, was reported from the United States. By conventional theory, this Earth was in a vast, wide stream of meteors, the Earth revolving so as to expose successive parts to bombardment. So keenly did Richard Proctor visualize the Earth, so immersed and so bombarded that, when nothing was seen in England, he explained. He spent most of his life explaining. In The Student 2-254, he wrote, "Had the morning of November 14th, 1867, been clear in England, we should have seen the commencement of the display, but not its more brilliant part. We have had some experience with the triumphs of astronomers. We have had some suspicions as to their greatly advertised accuracy. We shall find out for ourselves whether the morning of November 14th, 1867 was clear enough in England or not. We suspect that it was a charming morning in England. Monthly notices, RAS 28-32, report by E.J. Lowe, Highfield House, night of November 13th. And 14th, 1867. Clear at 1:10 a.m. High, thin cumula at 2 a.m., but the sky not covered until 3:10 a.m., and the moon's place visible until 3:55 a.m. Sky not overcast until 5:50 a.m. The determination of the orbital period of 33¼ years, but with appearances of a period of 33 years, was arrived at by Professor Newton by searching old records, finding that in the intersection period of 33 years, there had been extraordinary meteoric displays from the year 902 AD to the year 1833 AD. He reminds me of an investigator who searched old records for appearances of Halley's Comet and found something that he identified as Halley's Comet exactly on time every 75 years back to times of the Roman Empire. See the Edinburgh Review, Volume 66. It seems that he did not know the orthodoxy does not attribute exactly a 75-year period to Halley's Comet. He got what he went looking for anyway. I have no disposition for us to enjoy ourselves at Professor Newton's expense because, surely enough, his method, if regarded as only experimental or tentative, is legitimate enough, though one does suspect him of very loose behavior in his picking and choosing. But Dr. Adams announced that, upon mathematical grounds, he had arrived at the same conclusion. The test. The next return of the Leonids was predicted for November 1899. Memoirs of the British Astronomical Association 9-6. No meteoric event ever before aroused such widespread interest or so grievously disappointed anticipation. There was no Leonids in November 1899. It was explained they would be seen next year. There were no Leonids in November 1900s. It was explained they would be seen next year. No Leonids. Vaunt and inflation and parade of the symbols of the infinitesimal calculus, the pomp of vectors and the hush that surrounds quaternions. But when the axis of coordinates loses its rectitude in the service of the questionable selection, disciplined symbols become a rabble, the most high of mathematics, and one of his proposed prophets points to the sky. Nowhere near where he points, something is found. He points to a date, nothing happens. Professor Service, in Astronomy in a Nutshell, explains. He explains that the Leonids did not appear when they should have appeared because Jupiter and Saturn had altered their orbits back in the times of the Crusades, and nothing was disturbing the Leonids. And if you're stronger for dates than I am, think of some more dates, and nothing was altering the orbit of the Leonids. Discovery of America and the Spanish Armada in 1588, which, by some freak I always remember, and no effects by Jupiter and Saturn. French Revolution, and on to the year 1866, and still nothing the matter with the Leonids. But once removed from discovery and identification, and that's the end of their period, diverted by Jupiter and Saturn, old things that had been up in the sky at least as long as they had been seen. If we're going to accept the calculi at all, the calculus of probabilities must have a hearing. My own opinion, based upon reading many accounts of November meteors, is that decidedly the display of 1833 did not repeat in 1866, that a false priest sinned, and that an equally false high priest gave him sanction. The tragedy goes comically on. I feel that to all good neo-astronomers I can recommend the following serenity from an astronomer who was unperturbed by what happened to his science in November 1899 and some more Novembers. Bryant, A History of Astronomy, page 252. That the meteoric display of 1899 had failed to appear, as had been predicted by Dr. Downing and Dr. Johnstone Stoney. One starts to enjoy this disguisement, thinking of virtually all the astronomers in the world who had predicted the return of the Leonids, and the finding by Bryant of two who had not, and his recording only the opinion of these two, coloring so as to look like another triumph, but we may thank our sorely stimulated suspicionness for a still richer enjoyment. That even these two said no such saving thing. Nature, November 9th, 1899, Dr. Downing and Dr. Stoney, instead of predicting failure of the Leonids to appear, advised watch for them several hours later than had been calculated. I conceive of the astronomer's fictitious paradise of malarchitectural, malarchitectural with corrupted equations and paved with rotten symbols, seeming pure white fountains of formal vanities, boasts that are gushing from decomposed triumphs. We shall find their furnishing shabby with tarnished comets. We turn expectantly to the subject of comets, or we turn cynically to the subject. We turn maliciously to the subject of comets. Nevertheless, threading the insecurities of our various feelings is a motif that is the steady essence of neo-astronomy. That in celestial phenomena, as well as in all other fields of research, the irregular or the unformidable or the uncapturable is present in at least equal representation with the uniform. That, given any clear, definite, seemingly unvarying thing in the heavens coexistingly, is something of wantonness or irresponsibility, bizarre and incredible according to the standards of purists. That the science of astronomy concerns itself with only one aspect of existence, because, of course, there can be no science of the obverse phenomena, which is good excuse for some enormously disregarding if we must have the idea that there are real sciences, but which shows the hopelessness of positively attempting. The story of the comets, as not told in Mr. Chambers' book of that title, is almost unparalleled in the annals of humiliation. When a comet is predicted to return, that means faith in the law of gravitation. It is Newtonism that comets, as well as planets, obey the law of gravitation and move in one of the conic sections. When a comet does not return when it should, there is no refuge for an astronomer to say that planets perturbed it, because one will ask why he did not include such factors in his calculations, if these phenomena be subject to mathematical treatment. In his book, Mr. Chambers avoids or indicates that he never heard of a great deal that will receive cordiality from us, but he does publish a list of predicted comets that did not return. Writing in 1909, he mentions others for which he had hopes. Brooks' first periodic comet, 1866, for we must see what the years 1909 and 1910 bring forth. This is pretty indefinite anticipation, however. Nothing was brought forth. Accordingly, 2 monthly notices RAS 1909 and 1910. The Brooks comet that is recorded is Brooks 1889. Giacobini's second periodic comet, 1903, not seen in 1907. So we shall not have a chance of knowing more about it until 1914. No more known about it in 1914. Borelli's comet, 1905, to its expected return in 1911 or 1912 will be awaited with interest. This is pretty indefinite awaiting. It is now said that this comet did return upon September 19, 1911, Denning's second periodic comet. 1894, one expected in 1909, but not seen up to Mr. Chambers' time of writing. No mention in the monthly notices. Swift's comet of November 20th, 1894, must be regarded as lost unless it should be found in December 1912. No mention of it in monthly notices. 3 comets were predicted to return in 1913. Not one of them returned. Once upon a time, armed with some of the best and latest cynicisms, I was hunting for prey in the magazine of Science and came upon an account of a comet that was expected in the year 1848. I suppose that the thing had been positively predicted and very likely failed to appear, and for such common game had no interest. But I came upon the spore of disgrace in the word triumph. If it does come, it will afford another astronomical triumph. Magazine of Science, 1848-107. The astronomers had predicted the return of a great comet in the year 1848 in monthly notices. April 1847, Mr. Hines says that the result of his calculations had satisfied him that the identification had been complete and that, in all probability, the comet must be very near. accepting Professor Madler's determinations, he predicted that the comet would return to position nearest the sun about the end of February 1848. No comet. The astronomers explained, "I do not know what the mind of an astronomer looks like, but I think of a fizzle with excuses revolving around it." A writer of the American Journal of Science, 2 oh, pardon me. 2-9442 explains excellently. It seems that when the comet failed to return, Mr. Barber of Etwell again went over the calculations. He found that between the years 1556 and 1592, the familiar attractions of Jupiter and Saturn had diminished the comet's period by 263 days, but that something else had wrought an effect that he set down positively at 751 days, with a resulting retardation of 488 days. This is magic that would petrify with chagrin the arteries of the hemorrhagilicist. Can't say that word. Hemorrhagilicist statue that ever convinced the faithful, reaching back through 3 centuries of interactions which, without divine insight, are unimaginable when occurring in 3 seconds. There was no comet. The astronomers explained. They went on calculating. The 10 years later were still calculating. See Recreative Science 1860-139. It would be heroic were it not mania. What was the matter with Mr. Barber of Etwell, and the intellectual tentacles that he had thrust through centuries is not made clear in most of the contemporaneous accounts. But in the years 1857, Mr. Hind published a pamphlet and explained. It seems that researches by Littrow had given new verification to a path that had been computed for the comet, and that nothing had been the matter with Mr. Barber of Etwell except his insufficiency of data, which had been corrected. Mr. Hind predicted. He pointed to the future, but he pointed like someone closing a thumb and spreading 4 fingers. Mr. Hind said, according to Halley's calculations, the comet would arrive in the summer of 1865. However, an acceleration of 5 years had been discovered so that the time should be set down for the middle of August 1860. However, according to Mr. Hind's calculated orbit, the comet might return in the summer of 1864. However, allowing for acceleration, the comet is found to be due early in August 1858. Then Baum calculated. He predicted that the comet would return upon August 2nd, 1858. There was no comet. The astronomers went on calculating. They predicted that the comet would return upon August 22nd, 1860. No comet. But I think that a touch of mercy is a luxury that we can afford. Anyway, we'll have to be merciful or montonymous. Montonymous? For variety, we shall switch from a comet that did not appear to one that did appear. Upon the night of June 30th, 1861, a magnificent humiliator appeared in the heavens. One of the most brilliant luminosities of modern times appeared as suddenly as if it had dropped through the shell of our solar system. If it be a solar system, there were letters in the newspapers. Correspondents wanted to know why this extraordinary object had been seen coming by astronomers, Mr. Hind explained. He wrote that the comet was a small object and consequently had not been seen coming by astronomers. No one could deny the magnificence of the comet. Nevertheless, Mr. Hind declared that it was very small, looking so large because it was near this Earth. This is not the later explanation. Nowadays, it is said that the comet had been in the southern skies where it had been observed. All contemporaneous astronomers agreed that the comet had come down from the north, and not one of them thought of explaining that it had been invisible because it had been in the south. A luminosity with a mist around it. Altogether, the apparent size of the moon had burst into view. In Recreative Science 3-143, Webb says that nothing like it had ever been seen since the year 1680. Nevertheless, the orthodox pronouncement was that the object was small and would fade away as quickly as it had appeared. See the Athenaeum, July 6, 1861. So small an object will soon get beyond our view. Hind, Popular Science Review 1-513. That in April 1862, the thing was still visible. Something else that was seen under circumstances that cannot be considered triumphant. Upon November 28, 1872, Professor Klinkenfuss of Göttingen, looking for Belial's comet, saw meteors in the path of the expected comet. He telegraphed to Pogson of Madras to look near the star Theta Centauri, and he would see the comet. I'd not say that this was in the field of magic, but it does seem consummate. A dramatic telegram like this electrifies the faithful. An astronomer in the north telling A dramatic telegram like this electrifies the faithful. An astronomer in the north telling an astronomer far in the south where to look, so definitely naming one special star in skies invisible in the north. Pogson looked where he was told to look and announced that he saw what he was told to see. But at meetings of the RAS, January 10th and March 14th, 1873, Captain Tupman pointed out that even if Belial's comet had appeared, it would have been nowhere near this star. Among our later emotions will be indignation against all astronomers who say that they know whether stars are approaching or receding. When we arrive at the subject, it will be the preciseness of the astronomers that will perhaps inflame us beyond endurance. We note here the far smaller difficulty of determining whether a relatively nearby comet is coming or going. Upon November 6, 1892, Edwin Holmes discovered a comet. In the Journal of BAA 3-182, Holmes writes that many different astronomers had calculated its distance from 20 million miles to 200 million miles and had determined its diameter to be all the way from 27,000 miles to 300,000 miles. Professor Young said that the comet was approaching. Professor Parkhurst wrote merely that impression was that the comet was approaching the Earth. But Professor Burbridge announced that upon November 6th, Holmes' comet had been 36 million miles from this Earth and 6 million miles away upon the 16th, and that the approach was so rapid that upon the 21st, the comet would touch this Earth. The comet, which had been receding, kept on receding